minute, Jack. This is a friendly celebration.
I don't much like the way you celebrate.
And we're live on Four Men in America. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Don Woolley with Ken Bennett, Paul Fitch, and Zack Taylor's joining us today. And we're waiting for Jeff Hooch to join, but we're going to get started and give you some more of our rants for the week. So, Zack, you're first up.
Well, thank you, Don. Just for the audience to know, I was a Border Patrol agent between 1977 and 2003, stationed in Brackettville, Texas, McAllen, Texas, and finally Nogales, Arizona, where I retired. When I was at the Border Patrol Academy taking immigration and naturalization law, my law instructor, a Border Patrol supervisor of many years, told us that the Birthright Citizenship program was a policy of the U.S. government and it was contrary to law. That the law that was based on the 14th Amendment, and because of the time that it was introduced, it dealt specifically with the children of slaves that were born in the United States. It had nothing to do with illegal aliens, but it was the policy of the U.S. government to extend birthright citizenship, contrary to law, to children born to illegal aliens in the United States. So from the beginning, constitutionally and legally, birthright citizenship is illegal because it is not constitutional. The problem is, and I've watched this since 1977 when I became aware of this, the narrative is trying to dispel this by saying, oh, it's the right thing to do, or it's always been that way, or this. Well, it's true, it's been like that for a long time, but it didn't start apparently until the late 1950s, early 60s. Why it was started, I have no idea. Neither did my law instructor, who was asked why it started then. Had no idea. After going back and extensively researching the actual debate that happened in the U.S. Senate in the passage of the law of the 14th Amendment, it's abundantly clear that it was for the children born to slaves in the United States, nothing else. That we have evolved away from that is to evolve away from the Constitution, and that's a dangerous thing. That's my rant.
All right, good job, Zack. Any comments from anybody? And we're joined by Jeff Hooch, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, Jeff, and how are you, sir?
I'm good. I couldn't get you on my computer, so we got you on my cell phone.
Okay, well, that's
We're
fine.
working it well.
Yeah, Zack's on the phone too. So Zack's on the phone.
Great.
Zack's on the phone with Suki. There's Suki.
Okay, guys, I have right here in front of me the Constitution of the United States of America from Turning Point. I'm at our Amendment 14, Section 1. And there's been talk that I've read about the following wording. It says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. And that phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, is what I think we're going to have to work with to get this travesty adjusted properly. People who come across the border and calve their children are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. If they came across the border illegally, then they're still Mexican citizens. I'll assume, for this sake of argument, that we're talking about Mexicans in this case. And they come across the border, they are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. They're not United States citizens. They're not people subject to the Constitution and the rules thereof. They are Mexican citizens, and they're subject to the jurisdiction of their country of origin, Mexico in this case. So that's the operative words in my mind of what we need to get the Supreme Court to appreciate and establish that coming over here and calving is not making people citizens.
Yeah, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. I interpret that as your country of allegiance. You guys agree with that?
Sure, I do.
It's who you're allegiant to, right?
Well, my wife was a military baby. She was born to her parents when they were residing in Germany, Wiesbaden, Germany, as was her slightly older sister. Her dad was a chief warrant officer in the U.S. Air Force. At that time, it was probably called Army Air Corps.
Yeah.
1947.
It was the Army Air Corps, Ken. Yeah.
Now, by the time Gene was born in '58, I think it was the Air Force. When was the Air Force created out of the Army Air Corps?
I think it was
47.
I think it was 47. Yeah, 1947.
47.
Yeah.
Yeah, he retired 31 years Air Force, but they were he worked in supply. They were stationed in Wiesbaden, Germany. He was one of the supply officers in charge of dealing with the entirety of all of the equipment and things that the U.S. had in Europe after World War II. And it took them a decade or more probably to sell off or give away or whatever they did with all of the equipment that they had over there. So during the few years that they were in Germany, my wife was born there. Now, that doesn't make her a German citizen. And
Right.
in fact, she was born in a hospital in Wiesbaden. She
Mhm.
wasn't born on the base.
Yeah.
But
We can go back to Vattel's Law of Nations on this, because there's a phrase in Article 2 that's very important, and we've overlooked it at least twice now that I know of, maybe 3 times, and that's the term natural born citizen. Article 2 of the Constitution, and Jeff, you can help me with all this because you know this stuff cold. But Article 2 of the Constitution refers to a natural born citizen as one of the requirements for the President of the United States. And the way it's been described to me is in Vattel's Law of Nations, he was discussing who a natural born subject was. And the idea, of course, people in Europe were subjects. And a natural born subject was a person born of 2 parents who were subjects of that country. In other words, to be a natural born subject of England, your parents had to be both English. Now, some say it can go to just the male side of the family, and that is not in the original program. But see, the problem was it was never defined in the Constitution because, as I told somebody, well, we don't define pizza. We don't have to have a written definition of pizza. You know what it is. It's round and it's got pepperoni on it and cheese. You don't need a definition of pizza. And so a natural born subject was brought over, and the idea of the natural born subject was loyalty. In England and Europe at the time of our founding, the King of France was also the cousin of the King of Germany, who was also a cousin of the King of England. And the question of loyalty came up as to if France and Germany got into a fight, which uncle was the King of England going to support? And when Germany and France attacked England, was he going to just capitulate because he was fighting his 2 uncles? So the idea of the President of the United States having divided loyalty was a very dangerous subject that the founders didn't want to take on themselves. So they created this one opportunity in the Constitution, and it's the only place in the Constitution where it's brought up, for the president had to be a natural born citizen, which according to the Law of Nations of Vattel was someone whose parents were both citizens of the United States. Excuse me. They modified it slightly because nobody was a parent in the United States of the founders, because the United States didn't exist when the founders were born. So they said 14 years a resident of the United States at the ratification of the Constitution. Am I close to anything, Jeff?
No, I think you're good. No, good stuff. I was just going to recommend a couple books to our listeners. I think the authority on the 14th Amendment, at least in my opinion, is a guy by the name of Raoul Berger, Raoul Berger. And he wrote the book Government by Judiciary, The Transformation of the 14th Amendment. That really is looked at as almost the Bible of understanding the 14th Amendment. He also wrote a book called The 14th Amendment and the Bill of Rights. So if anybody was going to read one book on it, I would recommend that. But the 14th Amendment, of course, has been used by the courts to do a lot of things to encroach upon the powers reserved to the states. So the 14th Amendment has been misinterpreted and unconstitutionally abused by the judiciary to basically take away a lot of the federalism that we have. And I know that's not necessarily what we're talking about. We're talking about natural-born citizens and what is subject to the jurisdiction thereof mean. But I think it does go back, and it's obvious that the intent of the creators of the 14th Amendment meant, it was for freed slaves and their descendants to make sure that couldn't happen. So it has, though, kind of become something that's happened because we've allowed it to happen. And so by precedent, we've kind of allowed it to happen. But I don't think there's much standing in the way other than that, especially if you go back and look at original intent. So where's that going to come out? I really think if the court looks at it seriously, I don't think an executive order is the way to do it. I think it's got to be an act of Congress to support that, or else another president. So, but the 14th Amendment, I think, is fascinating just because the way it has evolved the American government. That amendment alone has changed the federalism we know greater than any other part of the Constitution.
So back to Ken's point, when I was in the service, the base that you were on, if it was a United States military base, it was considered U.S. It was considered you were on the U.S. property. Mm-hmm. You were in the USA, and therefore your parents, if you were born there and your two parents were citizens of the United States, you were a citizen of the United States. And I think if I remember right, wasn't John McCain's dad stationed in Panama, and his wife when he was born? So
correct. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so he was considered a United States citizen. So I think your wife Ken is a U.S. citizen.
Well, I know she is. So
yeah.
Oh, of course.
let me interject something here.
Sure.
Immigration law also plays into this. Under immigration law, there's two ways to gain citizenship by birth. It's called jus soli, the law of the place, or jus sanguinis, the law of the bloodline. Either one or both, the child born in the United States to two lawfully admitted permanent residents is a citizen of the United States. However, if that child is born to two United States citizens that are both jus soli and jus sanguinis outside of the United States, they're considered a United States citizen if and when they have continually resided in the United States for 5 years after the age of 14, they become a citizen. This is why Barack Obama's mother could not transmit citizenship to him at birth because she didn't have the 5 years continuous physical presence.
So in all reality, you're saying that Barack Obama was not a United States citizen?
Not by birth.
Not by birth. And is that what Joe Arpaio proved in his investigation?
No, Joe Arpaio proved that Barack Obama was using the Social Security number of a deceased person, and that the birth certificate itself was counterfeit.
Okay. Okay. 2 strikes.
Now, I got caught up in the whole Obama birth certificate thing, as you know, because I was Secretary of State at that time.
Right.
I became Secretary in 09. He had been elected in 08. And here's a little tidbit for you. When the birth certificate thing kind of exploded, people started wondering, was he going to be eligible to be on the ballot in Arizona in 2012 if he ran for re-election, which everyone expected that he would, and he did run again in 2012. So I went back and looked at the paperwork that he had filed in 08. And Arizona's form for a presidential candidate to get their name on the ballot, there's 3 check boxes, and they come right out of the U.S. Constitution. 35 years of age, natural born citizen, and you've resided in the U.S. for at least 14 years. He didn't check any of those boxes in 2008 when he filed the paperwork to run for president. So I called his campaign. I didn't get to speak to him personally, but I spoke to his campaign manager, and I said, this is the new Secretary of State. Not sure why the previous Secretary administration allowed you to be on the ballot without checking those boxes, but you're not going to be on the ballot in 2012 unless you check those boxes. Of course, then the birth certificate thing was exploding as well, and everybody, was firing stuff at me, saying that the birth certificate was a fake, or others saying that it was fine. And finally, one day I got an email from a guy in Glendale who had done some research, and he discovered that Hawaii had a state law that was unique to Hawaii. No other state had it. But it basically said that election officials from other states could ask Hawaii if somebody was born in Hawaii, not in the process of getting a copy of a birth certificate that people were arguing about whether it was fraudulent or not. And I've never done enough research to determine whether it was fraudulent. I've seen a lot of evidence by people saying that it was fraudulent, and others saying that it wasn't. But anyway, so this gentleman suggested that, since I was the chief election official in Arizona, I had the right to request of Hawaii a verification. It was called a verification in lieu of a birth certificate. And so I downloaded the form, filled it out, mailed it in with a $10 check, my own personal check. I didn't use Arizona state funds. And I sent this form and $10 into Hawaii to ask them to verify whether they had a person born on August 4th. Can't remember what year it was, but anyway, named Barack Hussein Obama III or whatever his name was. And I got a response from Hawaii. In fact, it's in my filing cabinet about 6 feet over there to my right. Probably one of the most interesting documents in the history of Arizona that is sitting in my filing cabinet here because I paid for it personally. And we were used to, Secretary of State's office between the various states are every day, hundreds of times a day, they are verifying to each other through what are called apostilles that something that happened in that state was valid in Arizona, and therefore somebody can, and it usually involved notaries. If there was a document signed by a notary in Arizona, but the transaction occurred in Texas, Texas would contact Arizona to get verification from Arizona that Susan Smith or John Jones or whoever it was a legitimate notary in Arizona at the time that this, bill of sale or whatever, mortgage or whatever it might be, was transacted. And so we were used to and did so hundreds of times a day. We verified documents back and forth between the 50 states. And so it made total sense to me to, instead of asking Hawaii to send us a copy of a birth certificate that everybody was arguing whether it was fraud or true, I just asked them and paid my $10 to have them tell me, yes, we have a birth certificate for a guy named this that was born on this date in Hawaii. Now, they sent me a verification in lieu of a birth certificate. And so when he filed his paperwork 3 years later in 2012 or 2011 to run for president, and he had checked those boxes, we had to put his name. I felt we had to put his name on the ballot.
What an interesting story, huh? Wow,
Yeah.
that's a headliner.
You could probably sell that on eBay, Dan.
I
Pretty
probably
good.
Ken. There you go. Yeah, that's great.
While you're talking, I'm going to get it so I can hold it up in front of you all.
Oh,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
That's cool.
Well,
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead, Zach.
Based on the Social Security number of record in the state of Arizona for Barack Obama, in what state was that Social Security number issued to?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because on both of my kids, the Social Security numbers were issued at birth.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm assuming, or questioning rather, where was that Social Security number, what state and what jurisdiction was it issued in at the time of birth?
Good question. Yeah.
My memory is Connecticut, but I can't be sure of that.
Yeah, and about 20 years before Obama was born.
Oops.
Our Arpaio was on the right trail.
Yeah.
He was too close on the trail. That was the problem.
Yeah. And he scared him, and they went after him, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That fifth generation warfare.
Yeah.
Discredit.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. So, while Ken's looking for that document, does anybody else have another rant that they'd like to present?
I'll refund his $10.
Here it is.
Wow,
There
look
he
at that.
Yeah.
That's a piece of history right there.
Yeah, it sure is.
Is it signed by anybody, Ken?
Yeah, signed by the state register, Alvin T. Onaka, who was the state registrar.
Is there a Social Security number on there for him?
No.
For Obama? No.
And there's nothing in Arizona state laws as far as running for office, even, qualifying to have your name on the ballot for president of the United States, that is tied to your Social Security number.
Right.
Zack has some good questions about how did he get his Social Security number.
Yeah.
There's a Department of Hawaii Health file number, 1516110-641. But it basically says recipient, state of Hawaii, verification of birth. Recipient of verification, Ken Bennett, Arizona Secretary of State. Pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statutes 338-14.3, I verify the following. 1, a birth certificate is on file with the Department of Health indicating that Barack Hussein Obama II, I'm sorry, not the third, was born in Honolulu, Hawaii. 2, the name of the person is Barack Hussein Obama II. 3, the Department of Health file number, I just read it to you, 15161-10641. Time of birth, 7:24 p.m. Name of the hospital, age of the father, birthplace of the father was Kenya, East Africa. Age of the mother was 18. The birthplace of the mother was Wichita, Kansas. Date of signature of parent was 8/7/61. Signature of attendant was 8/8/61. Date accepted by local registrar 8/8/61. So I think he was born August 4th of 61.
Okay, now I think if I remember rightly, I don't mean to interrupt, but if I remember rightly, what O'Pryor did, or at least what I heard he did, was he traced back the Social Security number to when and where it was issued, and found out that the person it was issued to died in Hawaii.
Oh, really? I don't know. Like I say, we didn't tie anything related to his name appearing on the ballot in Arizona to a social security number.
Now,
All we
the other thing I heard was the lawyer that was representing him in suppressing the information concerning his birth was Elena Kagan.
Wouldn't doubt that.
I don't know.
And who is she?
Who is she? Yeah.
Supreme
Nobody
Court
was
Justice Elena Kagan.
Yeah, I know.
Here's a copy of the birth certificate that they also sent me.
Oh, wow.
Here's a copy of my letter that I sent to Hawaii with my $10.
Wow.
Well,
So Ken, is that would you ever want to?
Oh, I'm sorry. It was $5. It was $5.
Oh, $5.
50. I'll double your money, Ken.
Here's the money order for $5 from Ken Bennett to the state of Hawaii.
There are a couple of interesting things about this. One is that the birth certificate that Obama produced was not actually a birth certificate; it was a certificate of live birth, and there was a lot of trouble.
Right, that's what it says right there.
Out of the yeah. See, evidently there's some difference between a birth certificate and a certificate of live birth. I don't know what the technicalities of that is, but that was a point that was raised by Arpaio. But the other thing is that the woman who issued that to Arpaio mysteriously drowned in an airplane accident on an inter-island flight in Hawaii not too long ago. Just coincidentally, nobody else in the airplane was injured. She just drowned. But there were the two things about what you just showed us there, Ken. One is that in 1964, if my memory is correct, Kenya did not exist. That was one of the issues that was raised. Kenya was called the Western Protectorate. It was a British protectorate in Africa. It would change the name, became independent, from what I understand, in something along the line of 66 or 68. And that's when it got the name Kenya. So Kenya didn't exist in 1964 when Obama was born. Of course, as the other thing is, the hospital that you showed didn't exist in 1964. This is something that's also been brought up. I'm doing all this from memory. I don't have notes, but those are the two things that kind of stood out in my mind about the document that Arpaio finally ended up with, and the examination of it in that time. So a lot of questions, no good answers.
The name of the hospital was Kapiolani Maternity and Gynecological Hospital.
Yeah, that did not exist in 1964.
So Ken, who was the Secretary of State in 2008?
Jan Brewer.
Oh, Jan Brewer. Oh. And why do you think she let it go on the ballot? With
I don't know.
Unchecked boxes.
I never tried to embarrass Jan with this.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Like
yeah, I understand. Yeah.
She appointed me to replace her as secretary when she became governor, when Napolitano left to be on Obama's cabinet. So my intention was never then or now to, embarrass Jan Brewer.
Did you, in 2012, did you actually find that out, or did one of your staff find it out that it wasn't checked?
No, I had them pull the paperwork and I looked at it myself.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I need to make a point. Having an investigative background, the more people try to convince you that something is correct, the more curious I become. And I'll give you two examples. When I was in McAllen, Texas, I got to know, because the lady that delivered both of my children was the mother of my good Border Patrol agent friend. Through that, I found out that the OBGYN doctors at this given hospital, I won't name it, had a habit of pre-signing and certifying birth certificates by the hundreds and leaving them in the nurse's office to be filled out after the birth. Well, we discovered, or I discovered, that some of these were being sold for up to $500 a piece.
Wow.
Okay. If I hadn't dug into that and just went with the explanation that was given to me by the nurses, I wouldn't have found that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go another step. I was checking buses one day in Nogales, Arizona. When you've been in law enforcement 30 plus years, you get this gut feeling something's wrong. All the facts presented to you say it's right, but the gut gets stronger. So I was checking outgoing buses. Now, the bus station in Nogales at that time was co-located with the port of entry at Nogales. You come out of the port of entry, you turn left, you either go to the Safeway grocery store or the bus station. So this bus was getting ready to go to Phoenix, you know, the seat of all evil in Arizona. And in the back of the bus, there was a very well-dressed man, and I kept noticing that he was nervous. I finally got back to him. I felt obligated to speak to everybody on the bus, just out of courtesy. Not like I was picking on any one person, but I was talking to everybody. He's the last guy I talked to. He showed me a brand new resident alien card, the new I-551, that had been advertised as it could not be counterfeited. Because the old I-151s were very easily counterfeited, and I'd seen hundreds of them. So this guy handed me this brand new card, and I looked at it, and it had his photograph. I matched his fingerprint. He became more nervous. So I got on the radio and called in the A number. And I had an earpiece in, so he couldn't hear the radio operator's end of the conversation. She told me the A number did not exist. So I didn't let on. I said, "Oh, that's great. How much did you pay for it?" He said, "Oh, I paid $5,000 for it." You don't pay for an I-551. I arrested him on the spot, took him back to headquarters, broke him down, and he said that he bought the I-551 from the night janitor at the immigration officer in Laguna Niguel. So it was the janitorial staff on the night shift that was making real I-551s on INS machines and selling them to illegal aliens.
Wow.
Now, if I had not investigated that off of a gut feeling, it never would have been resolved.
Yeah.
So what I'm telling you is nothing is always the way it seems.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah, I know. This kind of leads me to talk about or bring up the subject of all these Social Security numbers that were assigned to dead people that were still active that they found. And the only way that could happen is when the coroner or the person that signed the death certificate didn't report it. If they don't report it to Social Security, then Social Security is not going to know. And the only way to keep that from happening is to pay those people off, not to report it. So I can't think of any other way. When my mom passed away, they knew in 24 hours that she had passed away, and wanted back any monies that had been, sent to her that month of her death.
Yeah.
So
same thing with my mother.
Yeah. So I always kind of wonder in my mind, well, how do you keep a Social Security number? How do these people keep it active if somebody dies? How do they do that for 10 or 12 or 15 years? Well, it never got reported.
Then you got to look at those. Social Security started in 33. Is
Yeah,
that when Social Security started?
sometime in
And
the
we got
30s.
when they're 150 years old and 170 years old and 190 years old. Those
Yeah.
people they didn't die. They didn't,
Right.
and they're not still alive.
Oh,
They just
yeah.
never existed.
Just totally fabricated and didn't exist. Yeah. So,
Wasn't there a
Yeah.
news story a few weeks ago about AOC's, some member of AOC's family?
No, that's That's Jackson.
I think it was the Jackson congresswoman.
Yeah, her grandmother died 14 years ago, and they hadn't reported it.
Yeah.
And she owes
Oh
about
my God.
$400,000 in back pay.
Just an oversight.
An oversight. She looked fine the last time I saw her.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Oh my. So, well, I guess those are good things to rant about. I mean, that discovery must have been early. Was that early on in the process of issuing the new Identifications Act? Had it been out very long? The actual
No, it had been about a few years,
Oh, okay.
just a few
Okay.
years. But the cards are so different
Yeah.
that you can spot them from 15 feet away.
Yeah.
The old ones were either tan or green, and the new ones are kind of a reddish brown, more red than brown.
So when you saw that card, when he handed you that card, it looked legitimate to you, right? I mean,
It absolutely did.
So
But it didn't explain why he was so nervous.
yeah, but did you think? Did it go through your mind at the time? How did they possibly issue a number that didn't exist?
Well,
I mean,
I've been fooled before by counterfeit.
yeah,
You know, and had to get out the black light and the magnifying glass with
Right.
the light and everything, which I carried with me.
yeah.
So if I needed it. So I knew that these green cards that looked really good, that did not fluoresce, it didn't show the immigration seal on the front, it was a counterfeit.
Yeah.
But looking at it, I couldn't tell.
Okay.
Something else about birth certificates. If a child dies, they transfer the U.S. citizen birth certificate to the live child that was born in Mexico. And the lawyer in Texas that was doing this was a paid consultant to the commissioner of INS.
Oh my goodness.
That
So
American
you have to be-
entrepreneurial spirit.
You have to be so careful about what you assume.
Yeah. I imagine they've thought of a million ways to try to fool the immigration system and the authorities, and you've probably seen half of them. So.
Well, are you aware of Birthright tourism?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Birthright tourism? What's that?
That's where a person in a foreign country gets a travel visa, usually a B1.
Oh, comes here and has their baby here.
has the baby.
Okay, got
It's
it.
a package. They get the birth certificate and they go back to their home country in 21 years. That child comes to the United States and petitions for the parent.
Yeah.
From a country that otherwise not get an immigrant visa.
Yeah.
Okay. Chinese, I hear, are paying over $100,000 for one of these.
Well,
That's wrong.
Yeah. Hopefully the bulletin is up on the wall, right?
Well, corruption is so deep
Yeah.
that you have to be naive not to recognize that it exists.
Yeah.
Because people right away, I learned this when I was chairman of the Republican Party here, and I bet you Ken Bennett can kind of
Relate?
relate to it in a way.
Yeah.
People are, oh, get this done, get this fixed, and as soon as you stand up, they sit down. They want it done, but they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be involved in doing it except to encourage you to do it.
Yeah.
Sound familiar, Ken?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And you don't have to be the chairman either.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you want to be the chairman, just run for it, and and I'll withdraw my application.
There you
Yeah,
go.
16 years. I never once. I was nominated and elected from the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so Eddie, you got any
That's
other
the
rants?
problem about going to meetings. That's what
Yeah,
happens when you go to meetings, Zach. You become the chairman.
No, it's when you go to the meeting and go to the
And
bathroom.
sometimes you become the chairman if you don't go to a meeting. So
Yeah, and then when you come back, you're the chairman.
surprise,
That's
surprise,
happened
we
more than
voted for
once.
you.
Yeah.
Oh,
I sent
yeah.
all you guys an email today with an article about a Navy veteran that's been railroaded by the ATF. He had had an online business selling military, what do you call it, minutia, I guess, or militaria, and it all involved inert and legal weapons. He was involved in January 6th. He went to the Capitol and got arrested, and they raided his house, and they found these inert training dummy RPGs, and they took it back to the ATF lab, and a lab technician worked with the inert RPG launcher and got it to fire a bullet, and that made it a weapon of terror and added 20 years to his sentence for trespassing in the government, in the House of Congress, the Congress building.
Capitol, yeah.
He spent 3 years in solitary confinement. The president commuted his sentence, but didn't pardon him, and they're still holding him to this 30-year sentence. He's on probation right now. But the bottom, my rant has nothing, well, it has everything to do with this guy, but it has to do with the fact that the ATF how can we have a government division oriented to nothing but violating our constitutional amendment? I mean, any law that speaks to weapons is an infringement. I don't care how you do it. You can't take the word infringement, make a law that doesn't infringe on whatever it is the law says. And yet we have an entire department designed to do nothing but that. And that's my rant. Carry on.
And there are a lot of people talking about getting rid of the ATF, just dissolve.
As well they should.
Yeah, dissolve it. Yeah.
Well, what you sent out, Paul, was very interesting because it really does not bode well for the FBI. No matter what side you come down on, and obviously they were over prosecuting those on January 6th, making smaller infractions into terrorism, type allegations. But the FBI and the judge were colluding, it looked like, in that trial. And the FBI was on a mission to get this guy no matter what, and they weren't interested in exculpatory type evidence. And it does remind me a little bit of the Bundy case. Mm-hmm. Whichever side you come down on the Bundy case, whether the Bundys were right or wrong in what they did in Nevada, that the FBI was found of not giving over to the defense exculpatory evidence as they were supposed to. And they had almost 20 violations of a Brady law. It's not the same law of the guy who got shot with Reagan, but it's called Brady laws, where the federal government's supposed to play fair. And they weren't. They were doing everything they could to get the prosecution not see justice. And so these are just black eyes after black eyes with the FBI, and it's terrible. It destroys the fabric of our nation. And they should be more interested in finding out the truth rather than getting check marks and saying, hey, we got another win and we were on this. And the judges kind of siding with the FBI on this is pretty terrible. The judge in the Bundy case, and I was at the federal courthouse in Las Vegas when the Bundys got released. I went there to see. The judge herself said the Bundys were more dangerous than anybody else she had ever prosecuted. And she was so furious with the prosecution, at least that their Brady violations were discovered, that she was disgusted and she had to release them, and they got released that day. But to show the bias from the judge, that in that particular case too, kind of wore sour with me.
Yeah, and I guess y'all are aware that the whole Bundy thing was based on a Harry Reid program with the Chinese to put up solar panels, and the solar panels where he wanted to put them up had the desert tortoise, and the desert tortoise, the EPA said they couldn't put the solar panels where the desert tortoise was because the tortoise would be, their habitat would be destroyed. So they had to find an alternate place to put the turtles. Well, the place where they wanted to put the turtles was the Bundy grazing property, which was we'll get into BLM versus Nevada land, but that's beside the point at this point. They wanted to put the turtles up there, and the EPA said, well, you can't put the turtles up there because the cows will step on them and destroy them.
Mhm.
So that's why Reid wanted to get the cattle off that land so that he could trade the turtle property for the Chinese solar panel deal, which he and Rory, I believe his son's name is, had a major interest in. So that whole thing was just a gigantic corruption, graft and corruption program. And Harry Reid picked that judge, nominated her. So she was hip deep with Harry Reid in all that. And Reid had to get those people convicted so that he could get his cattle off that land and get his solar thing done. So the corruption is so deep, Jeff, like you said.
Well,
it's disgusting.
Well, and I can see how people be upset, this, that, and the other. But when you really dig into that case, you know, the head guy for the BLM's name was Love, but the FBI assessment, I think it's called a 302 threat assessment with the Bundys. Mm-hmm. They came out with it, and the head guy switched it from the Bundys are not a physical threat to they are. Yeah. So we've seen time and again where these officials, and because that was switched, they had sniper overlook going on the Bundys. But that's not my big rant of the day. I don't know if you guys have talked about the Supreme Court's midnight ruling. Did you talk about that?
No, but that was on my list, Jeff. So go ahead.
Yes. So I think we need to be careful. You know, look, I come down on the executive branch for doing things, and this is, you know, the presidents in the past and current that are expedient but not necessarily constitutional, and really pushing their boundaries, and then, you know, getting the ship off kilter. Well, this is a case where the Supreme Court went out of their way to do something that really was not yet in their wheelhouse.
Yeah, ask Alito about it.
Yeah, Alito wrote about that, and Thomas agreed with him. Yeah. But, you know, the problem is that we're going to start to lose really confidence in the judicial branch with the way they're reacting. And so, but even so, the way Trump reacts to this is very important, because we go back in history and see how different presidents react. I don't think President Trump should just wholly ignore what a lower court or the Supreme Court says. You know, we had Andrew Jackson do that, that resulted in the Trail of Tears. And of course, he said, you know, John Marshall made his decision. Now, the Supreme Court Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at the time, and most influential judge of all time, by the way, John Marshall, now let him enforce it. So he just totally ignored it. But there were consequences to that, you know. Then you had Abraham Lincoln. Roger Taney ruled when Abraham Lincoln unilaterally suspended the writ of habeas corpus, and of course that's a power that Congress is supposed to have. And Taney said that's unconstitutional. Lincoln semi-ignored that. He did a hat tip towards the Supreme Court, but said we're in a place of emergency because we're at war. There's an internal rebellion, and he needed to take that power. So he didn't totally disabuse the Supreme Court, but pretty much did. Then we have the next layer is somebody like a Bill Clinton in the 1990s who wanted to bail out Mexico, or more recently, Joe Biden wanting to bail out student loans and
Yeah.
cancel debt. And both of them, what they did is, they came out and the Supreme Court ruled against both of them. Bill Clinton just found another law that would support his constitutional theory that he could bail out the Mexican government or the Mexican peso, and he was able to do so. Some obscure law during the Carter administration, and of course, what Biden did is say, well, they ruled very narrowly. I couldn't do it this way and alleviate student debt, so let's just do it this way. And he got around it that way. So I think what Trump could do is kind of play the game a little so he's not losing the political capital, and also so he doesn't set a precedent and do exactly what the opposition is wanting him to do, which is set him up to absolutely just ignore a Supreme Court order so they can declare another January 6th. So he could say, okay, look, maybe we have to have due process, but this is the way we're going to do it. And in the end, so my rant really is Congress needs to step up. If you go back and look at the Enemy Aliens Act, it gave the president pretty plenary powers to, get rid of aliens that he thinks is a threat, mostly during times of war, but also in emergencies. And so Congress needs to come in and clarify what the presidential powers are, and then delineate what kind of due process they have.
Well, the due process is in the law. The due process, they have to be at least 14 years of age, right? They have to be an illegal. They have to be an illegal alien, right?
Right.
Zach's waving his head there.
Well, but the they don't have to be treated like American citizens in
Right.
due process.
They don't have
It's
to be given a
completely
trial.
Completely
Well-
different.
Yeah,
Completely. All they get is an immigration hearing before an immigration judge.
yeah.
Well, there you go. Yes, that's exactly.
But you've
They-
got district judges overseeing this, and they shouldn't even be involved with it.
They shouldn't even be involved in it.
Right.
This is the way it works.
Yeah.
The alien is determined not to be a citizen. That's called establishing alienage. In
Okay.
other words, no, he's not a citizen, therefore he is an alien. Then they have to determine of what country he is a citizen before they can deport him. Now we have a problem if the country that he's a citizen of will not take him back. And this is a problem that Trump has overcome, that other presidents has used as an excuse to let illegal aliens stay here.
Right.
Okay. So when a person is found to be illegally in the United States, they are not a citizen. They are presumed to be an alien until proven otherwise. So all the immigration officer has to do is say, this guy's an alien. He does not have any papers to be in the United States. The immigration judge says you are ordered deported. That's it.
Yeah.
If
But
he's
Zach,
going to put, if he's going to
they're-
put up a defense,
Yeah.
he has to do it then.
Right. But they can also claim that they're, going to be persecuted, and that's why they're here.
Complete different situation.
Well, I understand that. That's a complete different situation, exactly. But if they claim that, then they get a little bit more due process.
They're still deportable.
So here's what I heard about the midnight SCOTUS decision. I heard that when they came to the Supreme Court, and I don't know who they talked to, and what I heard was that order was unsigned, and I didn't know if is that unusual or not, an unsigned order from the Supreme Court.
Well, the first thing that was unusual, it was at nighttime,
Yeah,
and the government was not represented.
right. The government was not represented, and the ACLU told whoever they were talking to that they were going to go to all 96 districts and file for a TRO if they didn't give them this temporary reprieve.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's true or not, but if it is, it's just sad. So, and
It's very sad.
this kind of leads into my rant, which is, you know, we have Democrats running down to El Salvador to try to get back a criminal illegal alien who's an MS-13 gang member and was deported by 2 different judges in the United States and had a deportation order in his back pocket since 2019, I understand. And yet these Democrats will go to no end to put together charges against Americans to put them in jail, right? And it's it's just sick. It's sad.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's a ploy. If I'm misreading the situation, I'm sorry, but they're setting this up to justify restraints on the judiciary. That's what I see.
So what kind of restraints, Zach?
Legislative restraints coming from Congress.
Oh, okay. They're trying to prevent Congress from.
There's a problem.
Yeah.
You fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they did
And
pass.
The other thing is they're deflecting attention away from other more serious things.
Yeah. Here's another thing I heard. I just saw a congressman send out some information that he says that Trump is having the military deport these people and taking it out of DHS hands because the order only applies to the Department of Homeland Security. So he's handing them over to the military and they're taking them out.
Well, if I understand it correctly, there are under certain circumstances, the military can do that. It has to be in a state of national emergency or under War Powers Act or continuity of government or something like that.
Yeah. Well, he did declare an emergency at the border, right?
Long ago.
Yeah, long ago.
Right. Well, here's what I do know.
It's a national emergency.
Yeah. All that being said, here's what I do know. Any questions that we have over executive authority or what the law is can quickly be remedied by Congress passing a new law that supersedes any old law, because the naturalization power is in Article 1, Section 8, and Congress can rule it. And they can establish what kind of due process illegals get. They can establish. Now, look, you could argue the 14th Amendment applies and this, that, and the other, but in the end, Congress is in charge of writing the laws about our immigration and how to control it. And so that is my whole point here, is that to break the tie, if there's a lot of fighting between the executive and judicial branches, the legislative branch needs to step up and can very quickly make this clear. And that's exactly what needs to happen.
I'm with you, Jeff.
And
I'm with you. I'm gonna have to excuse myself, guys. I have a 4:30 thing that I.
Oh, okay,
yeah, I've got to go
fine.
pretty quick too.
Well.
Yeah,
we're just about done. So good. Okay. And I wanted to say one more thing about. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Zach.
Can the Congress overrule the Constitution?
No, the Congress can't overrule the Constitution.
Well,
but
if the Constitution, Article 14, is specific, they can't make a law inconsistent with the Constitution.
That is true, but the 14th Amendment, you need to see who that applies to.
That's the whole point. And I think the original argument centered around fealty to the United States and loyalty, which only at that time applied to the children of slaves born in the United States.
Well, we should have a whole thing on the 14th Amendment. We can discuss
there you go.
that.
Yeah, I'm good.
It's really simple.
Yeah.
Just go back to the debate and the final arguments leading up to the ratification. It's clear as a bell.
Okay, gentlemen, this has really been a good conversation today, and I appreciate you guys all. Thanks to Ken Bennett. Sorry he had to drop off right away, but thanks to you guys. We're at the end of our end of our hour. So appreciate you all joining. Is everybody going to be able to make it next week?
As far as I know.
Could be.
Okay, you're going to be in town, Jeff, and
I will. Yeah, I'll be back. I'm
Stay-
out of town right now, but I'll be back.
oh, you're out of town. Okay, so thank you, everybody. Thanks, America. Subscribe and like the program, and we really hope to see you next week. Oh yeah, it looks like Jeff you're sitting on a beach somewhere.
We're right there.
Yeah, there you go. All right. That's not Florida, is it? California?
No, that's up in Virginia.
Oh, Virginia. Oh, you're still in Virginia. Oh, well, thanks for coming on,
I
Jeff.
am,
We
yeah.
appreciate taking
Yeah,
the
you
time.
bet.
Yeah. Have a safe trip
bet.
back home.
All right.
Okay, there you go. Thanks, guys. And we'll see you next week if you can join us. And thanks, Zach, for jumping on. We appreciate your input. It's always excellent.
Catch you later.
Thanks, Paul.
Take care.
And it will encourage you to do another task, and another, and another. And by the end of the day, that one task completed will have turned into many tasks completed. Making your bed will also reinforce the fact that the little things in life matter. If you can't do the little things right, you'll never be able to do the big things right. And if by chance you have a miserable day, you will come home to a bed that is made, that you made. And a made bed gives you encouragement that tomorrow will be better.
Maxwell.
Yeah?
You're home.
Oh, cool. Thanks, Mrs. A.